Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in again to my members-only podcast. Last time we discussed how natural environments shape civilizations. Today, I want to share with you the importance of peace periods for the development of civilizations. As we all know, the rise of a civilization requires a certain level of safety and stability, which are essential for its survival and growth. The formation of a civilization is a slow and gradual process. Without a peaceful environment, emerging civilizations are likely to fail early. The early centers of civilization all had such conditions. Based on this, regions that developed quickly later on, such as the major English-speaking countries, the UK, the US, Canada, and Australia, all had similar innate advantages. However, other countries trying to replicate the success of the UK and US by adopting the same democratic processes often struggle to replicate their success. Why is it difficult for other countries to replicate the development paths of the UK and US? I believe it's not because these countries chose the wrong path or because of racial differences. The main issue is that these countries trying to emulate the UK and US lack similar spatio-temporal backgrounds and miss those crucial opportunities for peaceful development. Why do I think this way? Let's revisit some of the ancient civilizations we talked about earlier. Aside from Mesopotamia, which was strategically located, other civilizations like China, Egypt, India, and Greece had something in common. They were situated in geographic locations that were both trade accessible and protected by natural barriers. Take ancient China as an example. Before Zhang Qian's mission to the western regions, bamboo products from Sichuan were already reaching Central Asia, even though the imperial court was unaware of this. This shows that, despite not having fully open routes, traders had already started trans-Asian trade. However, it would have been nearly impossible for a country to mobilize a large army from Central Asia directly to Sichuan, China. This situation was not unique to China. Looking at the map, you will see that civilizations like ancient Egypt, India, and Greece were all located in safe zones protected by mountains, seas, or deserts, while also having access routes to the outside world. These conditions allowed these civilizations to safely go through thousands of years of development during their fragile early stages and gradually evolve into mature and advanced civilizations. Among the 5 major centers of civilization globally, Mesopotamia is an exception. Located on an open plain with no natural barriers, it was known as the Land of 4 Wars. But because its civilization emerged earlier and had a clear advanced position in the region, the surrounding tribes could not pose a threat during its initial 2,000 years, allowing the Sumerians to enjoy a nearly 2,000-year period of peaceful development. However, over time, the flat terrain made the region prone to frequent changes in rulers, turning it into a stage for power transitions. As global civilization levels have increased, the importance of geographic barriers on continents has gradually diminished. Yet, the ocean remains an effective safety barrier. The UK and the US, protected by the sea, have enjoyed a secure development environment and sustained growth, a scenario not commonly seen in continental countries. This has contributed to the special role of the UK and the US in modern history. This concept of Anglo-American exceptionalism was initially introduced by the renowned French political scientist Alexis de Tocqueville, initially referring to the uniqueness of the US and later extended to include the UK. Many historians and political scientists still use this concept today to explain why the experiences of the UK and the US are not replicable in other countries. What unique features do the UK and the US show? On the surface, countries like the UK The US, Canada, and Australia, which are isolated by oceans, have a significant common feature. They adhere to many traditional customs. For instance, the UK and the US, especially the US, still use the imperial system, which is less convenient than the metric system, but they preserve it as a tradition. In the political and social spheres, the practices of the UK and the US are iconic. For example, in their legal systems, the UK, the US, and other Commonwealth countries use common law, while many other countries around the world use civil law. Under common law, lawyers need not only understand the legal statutes, but also be familiar with many historical cases, undoubtedly adding complexity. Regarding electoral systems, the US presidential election system appears extremely complex to foreigners, but Americans take pride in it. Additionally, in the business sector, there are very few state-owned enterprises in the US and the UK, with the UK having privatized those it once had. There are countless such examples. These seemingly outdated practices actually reflect the importance the UK and the US place on tradition and experience, which usually require long periods of stable development. So why have the UK and the US been able to achieve this? First, let's look at the situation in the UK. Geographically, the UK is isolated from mainland Europe, separated by the English Channel. Although the English Channel does not prevent interactions between the British and continental Europeans, it makes it very difficult for any European power to cross over. Historically, the UK has only been conquered by European powers twice. The first time during the Roman period, when the UK was still a wild land. The second was when William the Conqueror from Normandy crossed the sea and conquered England. Since the Norman conquest, the UK has almost never suffered severe destruction from external wars. No matter what powers have emerged on the European continent, the UK has always maintained its independence. Although there have been changes in dynasties, there is a blood connection between them. The current British royal family still shares blood relations with William the Conqueror from 1,000 years ago. In such a social environment, the UK has developed a very comprehensive system of checks and balances and a democratic system. For example, the UK's checks on power can be traced back to the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215. Although the initial systems in the UK were not perfect, the British spent centuries improving and refining them, making them increasingly mature. America's history also highlights the importance of geographical advantages. The United States is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean to the east and the Pacific Ocean to the west. In its early years, the US was very fragile, but thanks to the isolation provided by these two oceans, European powers could not directly interfere with its internal affairs, giving the US more than 200 years of relatively peaceful development. During this period, although the US experienced a civil war due to issues with slavery, there were no major upheavals after the war ended. Even when both world wars turned Europe and Asia into battlefields, the US managed to maintain its independence and safety. Thus, like the UK, the US was able to gradually promote the development of civilization based on traditional foundations and continual accumulation of experience. Progress in civilization cannot happen without exchange and interaction, and the oceans not only did not hinder this process, but actually facilitated the expansion of commerce, an advantage many landlocked countries do not have. The situation in continental Europe was quite different. In the late Middle Ages, the industrial and commercial trade in northern Germany was quite developed. At that time, the Hanseatic League largely dominated the trade networks of Western Europe. Additionally, this region was the birthplace of the Reformation, and new ideas were widely accepted, theoretically indicating that this area could have been the first to enter the modern age. However, Germany's geographic position made it the land of four wars, with no natural defensive advantages. The outbreak of the 30 Years' War plunged the whole of Europe into prolonged conflict, with many German principalities losing about half of their male population, almost halting the progress of civilization in that area. After the war, the various German states focused mainly on how to quickly restore national strength and military power, leaving no time to develop slowly and continuously like the UK and the US. France's experience at the end of the 18th century also presented similar challenges. At the end of the 18th century, two groundbreaking revolutions broke out almost simultaneously on both sides of the Atlantic: the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Although history textbooks often discuss these two revolutions together because they symbolize the rise of bourgeois governments worldwide, their outcomes were very different. After gaining independence, the United States quickly entered a phase of nation building, while France fell into decades of turmoil and violence. This difference was partly caused by ongoing internal upheavals in France, and partly because neighboring countries saw revolutionary France as a threat and repeatedly formed coalitions to intervene militarily. Despite having a military genius like Napoleon, France struggled to stand alone against all of Europe. In such an environment, France lacked the time and conditions to accumulate experience. In the modern era, many countries witnessed the success of the UK and the US and attempted to imitate their development models, but few succeeded. This was mainly because they lacked the geographical advantages and the same opportunities for peaceful development as the UK and the US. In short, these countries could not replicate the developmental opportunities of the UK and the US, so even if they adopted similar development strategies, they could not achieve the same success. Extending this to personal development, the situation is similar. We all need a stable environment to grow. Ideally, such an environment allows us to access various external information while not being overly constrained by internal pressures, thus focusing on long-term personal development. Today, by analyzing the development experience of the UK and the US, we discussed the impact of geographical location and the timing of peaceful development on the progress of civilization. Since modern times, because the UK and the US developed mature social systems in a relatively peaceful environment, they were able to break through while other countries were mired in conflict, achieving rapid development. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope you will support us with a like. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.